Hello there, geeks and gamers. I'm MarcTheCyborg, and today I'd like to talk to you about a game I've been playing which I think you might enjoy. So without further ado... Streets of Rage 4 is the newest sequel to the classic Sega Genesis beat-em-up series and the first entry since 1994's Streets of Rage 3. This project was primarily made by 5 passionate developers across 3 companies, and the result is a game which feels like an incredibly faithful revival of the beat-em-up genre with slick, colorful visuals that make it look like a game which belongs in modern day. From a gameplay standpoint, Streets of Rage 4 plays almost exactly like any of the previous installments or any installment of Capcom's rival series Final Fight. You choose a character and using fairly simple mechanics fight your way through hordes of gangsters before facing a boss, then moving on to the next stage. The story of the game is also very simple. 10 years after Streets of Rage 3, the children of that game's antagonists Mr. X, cleverly named Mr. and Miss Y, are using a mind control technology to take over the city. Former Super Cop, dance choreographer, and classic gaming waifu Blaze Fielding calls on the help of fellow Streets of Rage protagonist Axel Stone, who's been living like a true Chad out in the wilderness, as well as newcomers Floyd and Cherry Hunter, and together they take justice into their own fists, venture out to the streets, and kick all manner of ass to stop the Y-Twins. What follows is 12 extremely colorful levels of side-scrolling action which you can tackle alone or with one friend online or up to 3 friends locally. Hey, my, couch co-op will never die. The game isn't incredibly long, but it is quite challenging, even on the normal difficulty. You begin each stage with 3 lives, with the ability to gain a bonus life by hitting 8,000 points in your score. When you've expended your lives, even if you've got the end stage boss down to 2% health, you're stuck starting that entire stage from the very beginning with your original 3 life count. No continues, no checkpoints. Each of the characters you can play as has a slightly different moveset and stats, and certain characters appear to be better suited to particular encounters. During your campaign, you're free to swap characters in and out, either before you begin a new level or when you hit a game over screen, so if you're having a lot of trouble with a particular level, it might be a good idea to try tackling it with a different character. If a particular stage does turn out to be too challenging for you, you're also free to add in an assist. You can add 1 extra life, 2 extra lives and an ultimate attack usage, or 3 extra lives and 2 ultimate attack usages, with your end stage score being divided by 2, 4, or 10 respectively. I may have played through solo on normal difficulty like a true gaming journalist, but I can at least brag that I never caved and used an assist. The end stage score is important because it adds to your lifetime experience points, which you can raise by completing stages with different characters on different difficulties, and eventually it'll allow you to unlock characters from the classic games. These are not simply skins for the Streets of Rage 4 fighters either, but the actual versions of the characters complete with their movesets and animation from the previous games. For a game which you can comfortably knock out in an afternoon, this replay incentive, as well as the very reasonable price tag, contribute to making Streets of Rage 4 a very good value. Ultimately though, they can add all the meta bells and whistles they'd want, and it wouldn't mean a damn thing if the game wasn't fun. And luckily, Streets of Rage 4 has you covered there too. The controls are deceptively simple. You use the analog stick or the D-pad to move left, right, up, or down on the screen, 1 button for a standard attack, 1 button for a special attack, 1 button to grab items from the ground, 1 button to jump, and a final one to fire off a quick back attack. Your basic attack launches a combo and will be your bread and butter, but jumping attacks will often knock enemies back as well, which is very useful for granting yourself some breathing room. The grab button lets you pick up health recovering food, point granting money, or weapons. The weapons do much higher damage than your basic attacks, but have a limited amount of usage. Picture a universe in which knives, pipes, and swords have ammo, and you'll kinda get the idea. You can also throw a weapon to damage an enemy and pull off a super slick move where you catch the weapon like a boomerang after it bounces off one of the bad guys, and that honestly never gets old. There is no block button in this game. Your only methods of defense are to move out of range of an enemy attack, hit the special attack button without holding a movement direction, or throwing an enemy. The latter 2 attacks grant you invincibility frames and will certainly help keep you alive if you learn to use them properly. Anytime you use the special attack button, whether in a neutral defensive posture or as an offensive attack by moving in a direction at the same time, you will do a fair amount of damage, but it will also gamble your health. However, you can earn this health back by striking enemies while avoiding damage. This creates a really cool risk-reward system which incentivizes you to follow up your high damage attacks with more aggression, but it punishes you if you try to live too dangerously.
I also like to live dangerously.
A big part of mitigating damage taken will be understanding your enemy. There are a handful of enemy character models, and each type has different attacks, vulnerabilities, and invulnerabilities. As strange as it sounds, all enemies will be named, but all enemies of the same type and difficulty will have the exact same name, as is traditional for the beat-em-up genre.
Who are the 5 best rappers of all time? Think about it. Dylon, Dylon, and Dylon. Because I spit hot fire.
So while the initial versions of the shaved-headed gangsters can use long weapons and knock you out of the air if you try to jump kick them, the advanced version will flat out catch weapons you throw at them like they're Jack freaking Burton.
Goodbye, Miss Burton. It's all in the reflexes.
If the combat does get too intense and you find yourself getting overwhelmed, you can always hit the special attack and grab buttons at the same time in order to launch an ultimate attack. These attacks do both major damage as well as area of effect, but they cost a star. You start each stage with 1 star, and additional ones can be picked up from the ground or gained as an assist, but abstaining from using them will result in a major point boost at the end of the level. Without the lifetime experience system in place, I would have been much more likely to not care about those points and just use my ultimate attacks, but I found myself wanting to unlock those bonus characters, so I only ever used the ultimates if I absolutely had to. You also get bonus points for completing each stage with different characters, so one of the easiest ways to bump up that XP is to play earlier levels with characters you haven't used yet. This is made even more fun because of the fact that there are variations to how each character plays. Axel is a solid mix of speed and power. His offensive special is a multi-hit combo followed by what is essentially a flaming dragon punch. Blaze is fast and agile with the best flying kick out of any character, and also she's aesthetically very pleasing. Cherry is very fast and uses her guitar to do a decent amount of damage. She can also jump onto a character's face and brutally beat them like the most vicious animal in existence.
Chip, I'm gonna come at you like a spider monkey.
Floyd the Samoan Cyborg, or Jax the Rock Johnson as I call them, is incredibly strong and has the extremely useful ability of picking up 2 enemies at once and then smashing their heads together for major damage. This skill was invaluable for completing the game solo. After a few missions, you automatically unlock Adam Hunter, the last of the original Streets of Rage protagonists and father to Cherry. He's not only a decent mix of speed and power, but is also able to do a quick step by double tapping a movement direction. Xray Girl and I went through the whole game co-op and we found that there is no difficulty scaling at all. This makes co-op significantly easier because you essentially have double the resources to manage the exact same challenge. Above the normal difficulty, there are also Hard, Hardest, and Mania, and yes, it made my brain hurt that there was a difficulty which was harder than the one called Hardest. But pushing my obsessive cyborg compulsions aside, if you're playing with some experienced players, cranking up the difficulty will probably be a good call. Playing co-op also adds to your lifetime XP count, so firing up the game with a buddy or 3, even if it's just for a stage or 2, will count as progress towards those character unlocks. There is even an experience bonus granted for completing a stage with 2 players for the first time. There may even be an additional bonus for 3 players or 4 players, but with the current state of the world, Xray Girl is the only human who I let anywhere near me, so I've only tested the 2-player mode. But little touches like that go a long way towards giving this rather short game some longevity. The other point for value is the pretty extensive amount of bonus features like concept art and character profiles. These were the kind of blurbs you would often find in early 90s video game instruction booklets. For the Zoomers out there, in-game tutorials used to not be a thing, and instead we used to have these tiny booklets which we'd bring to school and read while pretending to be listening to our teachers. Who needs math anyways? I needed to know what Ryu and Ken's style of karate was called. It was Shotokan, by the way, which is the style I trained in as a boy, and was super pissed when I found out that Hadouken fireballs weren't an actual thing I'd be able to do if I worked hard enough. As far as downsides go, the only ones I'd cite are because of how firmly rooted in the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre Streets of Rage 4 is. There are no advanced blocking, dodging, or counter systems which would really pull this series into modern day, but that kind of feels like bagging on the game for what it isn't rather than appreciating it for what it is. If you want the perfect example of what this genre turned into, play the Yakuza games, because they are fantastic modern beat-em-ups with all sorts of crazy, hyper-Japanese bells and whistles, in addition to having very deep and satisfying combat systems. But if you're a fan of the old ways, or you just like to see what this vintage game style was all about, Streets of Rage 4 is a great representation of a classic genre, with just enough modern flair to keep things fresh, without changing the core of what it was. You can find Streets of Rage 4 on GOG, Steam, Nintendo Switch, PS4, or Xbox One, including Xbox Game Pass. So what are you waiting for? Get out in the streets and start fighting. Not literally though, I mean just stay home and play video games.